A study in the United States has found a link, apparently, between left-wing values and heightened anxiety. It even links ideology to rates of depression, which it reckons is especially prominent among younger liberals. Apparently, Conservative teenagers are not nearly as depressed. What do you make to this, Toby Young?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting finding, and it's been repeated in different studies, so it doesn't seem to be an isolated one-off finding. It turns out that liberals, by and large, not all of them, but on average, are less happy, more prone to mental illness, anxiety, depression than conservatives, and particularly liberal women. And so there's a speculation as to why this should be. How do you explain this? And I just read a really good article by Jonathan Haidt in the Free Press. He's an American social psychologist, academic, wrote a great book called The Coddling of the American Mind with Greg Lukianoff. And Greg Lukianoff's great insight into why students demand things like safe spaces and care about microaggressions and worry about having to encounter views they disagree with is because they've been coddled, they've been poorly parented, they haven't been taught how to deal with resilience. Greg himself suffered from depression. At one point he was hospitalised with depression, and he overcame it when he was taught cognitive behavioural therapy. And the three lessons he emerged with from his training was that the reason I was depressed is because I was prone to catastrophizing, I was prone to emotional reasoning, and I imagined I was at the mercy of these forces I can't control. And Greg produced this great insight, which is young people today, particularly at universities, reinforced in social media, they're taught reverse cognitive behavioural psychology. They're effectively taught to catastrophize. They're taught to engage in emotional reasoning. You know, my feelings trump your facts. They're taught to believe that they don't have any control over their lives. They're at the mercy of patriarchy and heteronormativity and white supremacy, all these oppressive forces turning them into victims. All of these things contribute to mental illness, to depression. It's the opposite of the way they should be thinking, and that's, he thinks, why, and Jonathan Haidt thinks why, particularly girls, because they're more exposed to this kind of stuff on social media, and it all kicked off when social media exploded with smartphones around 2012, 2013. He thinks it's because they're essentially being taught the opposite of the lessons they should be being taught. They're being taught they're not in control. The world's going to the hell in a handcart. There's nothing they can do about it. That's why they're so depressed.
Laurie?
Yeah, I mean, I see some of the things you're saying there, and I also think in some ways it is a bit tough, no matter what your political persuasion is. We have rivers full with affluence, poverty is increasing, government's not providing enough support to people in the cost of living crisis, inequality is increasing, money's being spent on crooked PPE and so on. And I think that is quite a tough environment to look out at politically, and we have political leaders who are essentially saying that that's just the way it is, or we can't do so much about that, and, you know, just crack on and pull up your bootstraps in your own way. And I think that
does that get you down, that, when you, like, look at this PPE stuff and the examples that you just give, does that affect your mental health?
I mean, it's a bit miserable, but I am a strong believer in the ability for better leadership, for not the kind of defeatism as miserabilism that we have in current political leaders now. And I'm hugely confident in the ability of the British people's ability to overcome the challenges that they face. I think there's too much of that lack of ambition and drive in politics. And I think, to be fair to many people, whatever their political persuasion, it can be a bit miserable to look upon that. But we can change it with different leadership, with more inspiring leadership.
Yeah.